Hey, business builders. Today, I'm pleased to have Mike Green on the next episode of the Business Builder Way. I love sharing with you stories of people who have already built a business that's pretty substantial. And I love sharing the ups, the downs, the hero's journey that they've been on as they've built that thing, and then how they integrated their whole life with the business. And I also love sharing with you insights and wisdom from coach friends of mine who are business builders, but oftentimes don't have a whole team of employees and equipment and things like some of the rest of you do. This particular guy is one of those coach friends, and not just any coach friend. I met Mike Green when he and I were in a mastermind group together, much like I have a mastermind group for the business builders right now. And when I met Mike, I was fascinated because he's the only guy that I can think of, I know, who has lived and worked on all 7 continents. And he told stories about hitchhiking from New York to Alaska with no money in his pocket, told stories about logging in Scotland. I had dinner with him one night and he brought to me some beef jerky that had been made by a Lakota Sioux man who was a friend of his. And he told me the story about this guy and the recipe and how, so Mike's one of those guys that can really bring a story to life like that, like about a common item like beef jerky. And so I've always been fascinated with Mike. And he went and did a few years in Saudi Arabia as a coach for people who were working in the oil fields. And he took his family there and had wonderful experiences in the Middle East that he was able to share with them. And when he came back, he went to Alaska, which is where he loves to be. And he's got a cabin in Alaska. And now he's doing his coaching, but what he's adding on to things like Zoom calls and phone calls and books and helping people get clear about their goals and who they are, what he's adding on to that, which is quite fascinating, is excursions into the Alaska bush with him. So going out, being choppered in or bush planed in, and then hiking and experiencing Alaska and experiencing some of the very visceral, powerful things in Alaska, like rushing rivers, like the big mountains, like glaciers that are calving big chunks of ice into the sound, and you're in there in a kayak. So he takes people out in the bush to like really get grounded and feel who they are, because when you're in a powerful place like that and you're not disrupted by work and your phone, it's where you have a lot of growth and you can really grasp who you are at the core, who you want to be for the next 25 years, what kind of leader, what kind of business builder you want to be. So Mike Green is all these things that I'm talking about. In today's episode, he talks a bit about his book, which is called Wondermust, and it's very entertaining and fun. And if you take Wondermust and take a journal and sit and apply what he says in there, so he talks about finding your truth. So you take his book and you write down what it means to you, you're absolutely going to grow just from reading the book. But if you take the book, a journal, and then this episode with Mike Green, you're really going to benefit and grow. So let's get after it. I'm so happy to share Mike Green with you. Welcome to the Business Builder Way podcast, where we help business builders grow leadership skills and wisdom and stay grounded through hero stories. So let's get after it. Hey, business builders. I'm super excited to be joined by Mike Green today. Mike is in Alaska. Mike is the author of the book Wondermust. And Mike is going to talk to us today about finding your truths. And he's going to talk to us about at least a few of the adventures he's had living and working on all 7 continents. Mike, it's really good to have you here today. And I'd like to just drop right in. And so you wrote a book. You are an adventure coach. You are a high performance coach. You work with business owners, CEOs, C-suiters, creators, anybody who wants to live a bigger life and a life that really captures who they are inside. And I'm so glad to have you today. And one of the stories in your book, Wondermust, that you kicked this thing off with is that one time you hitchhiked from upstate New York, where you were living, all the way to Alaska. And if I remember right, you left New York with no money in your pocket and a commitment to how you were going to get that trip done. And you did it to help inspire a group of people. Could you drop us into that story? What happened? Where were you going? Why were you doing that? How did it go?
Right. Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here. I've always held you in the highest regard. And everything you said is true. Yes, I am a coach for all the things that you say. And yes, I did hitchhike from Western New York because I come from a small hometown called Hornell, New York, which is a railroad town just south of Rochester. And I was at the time teaching 10th grade global history. And everyone in my class, all my students and their parents, everyone in my hometown, everyone nearby that hometown knew of me as a kind of an adventurer because at that time I had a TV show called Backyard with Mike Green, which is really good comedy. If you Google good comedy on YouTube, you could find Backyard with Mike Green. And
It's
this
still
is
out there?
way yeah, there's some things on there. There's actually one of me driving my Jeep. I restored an 81 Scrambler with no doors, no top, from New York to Alaska, an old 81 Scrambler. And so I recorded that with my good friend, Justice McClarty, who's now a big wig with Saturday Night Live, actually. Anyway, but everybody knew of me. Everybody knew of me as an adventurer. So that's the really important part of this conversation or the story. So as I'm in front of my students going through the French Revolution global history class, this first period or my first history course or first history group, it wasn't first period, it was like second or third period. And I'm sitting there holding the book, and I literally remember this just as if it was, and it was a crazy out of body experience, almost like in a three-way, because I'm in myself, being myself, and then I'm hearing myself inside myself say the things I'm about to say, and then I'm actually in the upper right-hand corner looking down at me, so I'm having an out-of-body experience. This is all taking place at the same time, and I'm holding the book, and I'm talking about Marie Antoinette's very famous quote, "Let them eat cake." And as I say that, I just had this experience, and I honestly said to my students, what the F am I doing? I used to be fun. I used to teach kids your age what really matters in life. I used to teach them how to survive in the wilderness and how that isn't going to support, how that's going to support you in your development throughout life. And here I am teaching you about eating effing cake, right? Meanwhile, this is like in 1999, 2000, and the students' mouths were all open, and I'm thinking to myself, first person self, what the heck did you just say? Second person, where is this coming from? And the third person looking down out of body going, whoa, this is going to get good. And then I said, just in the whole diatribe, I said, from now on, and I don't know where this is coming from, Stephen Pressfield talks about the muse within, in the art, war of art. And I believe it was my muse, if you want to go with that. And I said, from now on Fridays, we're doing life lesson Fridays because I'm going to teach you what really matters in life. And everybody still mouths agape. Kids are in the back, leaning back in their chairs. I'm thinking, oh boy, this is big. So that's honestly what I started doing. Friday life lessons. And like the first life lesson was a real simple one about why is it important to hold yourself well in public? What does it mean to hold yourself well in public and speak well in public? And I had the kids walk down the hall and with their chin up or their chin down and they're slunched over. And this is true stories. I still go back to my hometown. I see those kids and they tell me, Mr. Green, those were the best moments of my high school days. Then I did one like, what's the real deal with college back in those days? Debt, freshman 15, drink till you throw up, those kinds of conversations that I probably wouldn't be able to have right now, honestly. Other ones I had were like dining. Why is it important to have manners? And what are those manners that are pretty much standard in life? And then one day, we talked about the media, and this is right when CNN and Fox News were just about to be 24 hours. They were just getting started, getting the rhythm. And we said to him, I said, all right, so I asked my students this question. I said, in the event, now these kids didn't have cell phones in their hands constantly at that time. Maybe one of the kids did. And I think I just got my cell phone at that time. I said, if you're on the side of the road, and most of these kids are about to get their driver's license. So that's really important. They're 10th graders. I said, if you're on the side of the road with a flat tire, here you have three options. What would you do? First option, one, lock yourself in the car. Don't let anybody help you. Wait for the cops or somebody you know to help you. Two, would you work, if someone came up to support you and help you, would you help them, but be far enough away that if they tried something, you could run away? Or third, would you be there and help that person and be side by side with them and hold the, lug wrench or whatever you had to do? I said, all right, write your answer down and send it to the front of the class. So they all did that. I said, all right, here's the homework for Friday. My attendance was perfect after the second class, absolutely perfect on Fridays. I said, go home, read the newspaper. And at the time we got the Hornell Evening Tribune, Democrat and Chronicle, and the Buffalo News, and the Elmira, I think, I forget what it was called, Elmira Gazette. I said, go home, take your newspaper, take a marker after everyone's read it and write a positive or a negative on every headline. Come back with the numbers. Great. Monday morning, everybody comes back with the numbers. I get them. Next Friday's life lesson shows up. I said, all right, everybody. Here, the assignment was this. This is the conversation we were having. What did we find? Let's talk about what did we find. Most of the numbers were about 85% negative in the newspapers, and everything was that's from birthing announcements to weddings, etc. I said, okay, great, 85% negative, 15% positive. I go, okay, here's the question I asked you regarding if you're on the side of the road. What number do you think we came up with? And the kids were all like, well, I ain't going to have nobody help me. No one's going to help me. And I said, well, actually, the number is 85% negative. No one's going to stand side by side with that person. Only 15% of all the classes were going to do that. And I said, why is that? And here we started that conversation because our parents watched the news. We watched the news. Something bad happens in Texas or wherever. We think it's going to happen here, which it very well could, but the possibility is very low. But why is that? And we talked about the media, the influence of the media that has on you. And this is back in 1999 or even 2000. And all of a sudden, the news came up again. I started feeling it. I could see myself out of body. I was thinking that conversation with myself, okay, what's this coming? This muse starts talking. I said, well, to prove that you can believe in the kindness of others, I'm going to hitchhike with no money or no food from Western New York all the way to Denali Park, because everybody knew I was going to be going to Alaska, because that's what I did. I go to Alaska every summer. I write newspaper articles or my TV show, that kind of thing. And all my kids were like sitting back with their mouths agape. And I just thought to myself, what did you just say? And good thing you're friends with the principal, because you're going to need it. Because I ultimately said you can go hitchhike, right, to these kids.
Right.
Sure as hell, man. That's a true story. This was my first period class or first history class of the day. By the middle of the morning, I was already down in the principal's office. Teachers were coming up to me. By the weekend, I was at the cop shop, the police station, because my third period or third class of history, global history, his son was in my class. I was down there and he had me in his office at the police station. True story. My mom cried 3 times before I even left. 85% of the people I spoke to said I was going to end up dead in the ditch, or even raped in a ditch, or dead in the ditch. I always ended up dead in the ditch, or always ended up in a ditch, either dead or hurt or violated in a ditch. And yeah, even my good friends, very rare did I have somebody say, you can do it, Mike. So that's what happened. And then ultimately, I had my teaching certificate because I graduated from college, but within New York State at the time, you could not teach to the test. At the time, that was big, if you weren't registered yet with the state. And my certification hadn't gone through a myriad of paperwork. So late May, this begin, you teach to the test. I left to go to New York, to go to Alaska, and literally left a really nice apartment. My roommates thought that I'd be home that night, and walked down the stairs, put on my backpack, which I was very clean cut, smaller backpack. It wasn't like a huge backpack. And lit up a really good cigar, walked out of town smoking a cigar. When the cigar went out, my thumb went out. And literally my first ride was an ex-Vietnam vet. It was crazy. I mean, his fingers were gnarled, hanging onto the steering wheel, and he looked straight ahead. And he says, "Oh, I just got done giving blood because if I don't give blood, I get headaches every month." I was like, "Okay, so this is great." And he was a POW twice and tell me his stories, and it was amazing. And the third ride was a father of the smallest at the time preemie baby ever to survive, and from Buffalo, and told me how his child was a prodigy and how he paid for his bills by all the scientists that came over to figure out why was this child a prodigy. It was really crazy. So yeah, that was the first day in itself. So it was amazing.
And of course you write about this in the book, and you did make it to Alaska. How long did it take you to hitchhike to Denali Park?
9.5 days. And what I need to say about this is really important. I've driven, at the time I rode back on a motorcycle from Alaska, an old 81 Kawasaki LTD 750 I bought for $800. And then I drove my Jeep up with my buddy Justus. And then the next year I drove up with my girlfriend at the time. And at the end of the trip, we finally made it to Alaska. I said, "We made it." She goes, "Yeah." I go, "We had a great time." She goes, "You were kind of an asshole." And I said, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, you're all controlling. We had to be here. I had to be to Missoula by 3 days. And then I had to be up at Kamloops. And then I had to be over on the Cassiar. And then I was always having to be in control. So one of the great learning lessons that I had during this whole hitchhiking, and I still have the sign, and I just showed it to my boys the other day, that my student, Chelsea Weber, made for me. One side said west and the other side said north. And it was in the size of the largest Ziploc bag you could have. And I would just hold that sign up, going west or north. So I gave up all control, right? So if someone was going to Memphis and it was west, I'm going to Memphis. And 9.5 days is very fast, because when you drive it, you can do it from Western New York, basically 8 days. That's 12 to 14 hours of, moving right along. The reason it took me 9.5 is because I got 2 really big rides, one across America and then one up from basically Grand Cache, Canada, all the way up to Whitehorse. And that was a 3-day ride with a guy in a truck that had a dog that trained him. It was horrible. He had a shifter on, what do they call it, on the column? He shifted his truck gears on the column. Yeah. So it took me 9.5 days, 37 rides. I had one bad experience from it all. Most of you people are probably, "Well, how did you eat if you had no money or no food?" Well, first of all, I never said that. My name's Mike Green. I'm hitchhiking from New York to Alaska with no money or no food. I never told him that the very first. Literally, it would have to take a long, long, long time for me to even say that. Gotcha. I never accepted money. If someone was going to stop at like Burger King or something like that, and they wanted to give me a sandwich, I accepted it. But I would always wipe the windshield for them at the gas station or whatever. When it came time for me to eat on the side of the road, I would go to these small family-owned restaurants and go to the owner or go inside with this backpack, clean cut again, and ask to see the owner or the manager. And these family ones were usually the owner was right there in the front. And I would say to them, and this was really, really amazing experience to ask for a basic human need of food. So I had shelter, I had my tent. So I go in there, I say, "Yeah, my name's Mike Green. And I noticed as I was walking by that you had some garbage in your bushes and your parking lot. Could use some attention. If you give me a trash bag, I'll spend half an hour cleaning it up if you give me a sandwich." And most of them, very odd and very strange energy would happen. They would be like, "No, we don't do that. We'll just give you a sandwich." I go, "Well, I'm sorry, I can't accept that." Well, meanwhile, remember, this is a small place and everybody's ears, the old man in the corner with the coffee cups hanging out, wondering, "Who's this guy?" And everybody's listening in, and then the intensity would just go from 8 to 11, right? And I'm sorry, then I have to stand strong and say, "Sorry, I can't accept that." And they go, "Well, all right. It was always women. I really never spoke to any men inside the restaurant. And they would say, okay, well, we'll give you a bag. So they give me a bag and they'd always call me in. And when I always get called in, they always tell me to wash up. And then I wash up and I go to this where my backpack was, and there'd be a full course meal. And then the woman usually would always come with a to-go container. And sometimes in the first one, the lady told me, almost started crying here in this booth. Call your mother, right? And back in those days, I had a Sam's Club call card. You put the 15 numbers in it and you can call, right? You have $5.75 left of call time, So that's how it all went down.
Nice. So in your book, you lay out stories like that. And the one thing that came out in what you just shared was, as you were talking about the hitchhiking, while hitchhiking, you couldn't be in control. It was a lot of letting go. So True. In your book, you take us on a journey, and the book is wonderful, Mike. It's
Thank you.
Filled with adventure, these stories from hitchhiking to being a lumberjack in Scotland to handling cargo in Antarctica. And I love how you tell these stories of living and working on all 7 continents, but also frame it with things like what you just said about the need to not always be in control, or how that's not always helpful. Like the person that went with you to Alaska wasn't particularly fond of your controlling nature, and so you recognize that it might be helpful to let that go, and you practice that on the trip to Alaska. Your whole book is full of insights like that taking your book along with a journal makes me feel like I'm on the journey with you, and that I can dig for some of those things inside me. And of course, present day, you're living in Alaska. So now you're living there full time, right? In a cabin, and you've got a family, and you've got a business. So part of this is sharing your story for other business builders who listen to our podcast. And part of it is to find out a little bit about the business and life that you're creating right now. So we'll talk a little bit more about stories in the book, but tell us about what are kind of the nuts and bolts of adventure coaching. Like Ian in the book is your fictitious client that goes out there with you and spends time. But what are the nuts and bolts of the work that you're doing with high performance people right now?
Well, the book, much like you described, is framed of me as a venture coach with a client by the name of Ian, who I've coached in the office setting, quote unquote office setting, who's now come to Alaska to experience the Alaskan bush, the backcountry. And having years and years and years of experience guiding for big game in Alaska, he feels comfortable enough that I can keep him safe, physically safe, right? What's the emotional safety when your phone doesn't work and you stop getting all types of dopamine hits from likes and emails and pictures of your kids and all that? When that stops, you're by yourself, literally. And my book is basically 8 different heroes' journeys, basically Joseph Campbell's work, right? So imagine that. Now, as we talked about the hitchhiking experience, or the commercial lobstering, which is not written about in the book, or whether it be coal mining in Colorado, or et cetera, or modeling in New York City, or whatever. They're all heroes' journeys that all add up, right? So finally, writing this book allowed me to see that all the things I've done in my life all add up, and I can ultimately, if I had the courage to step out of the known into the unknown, I could literally start a business and a lifestyle and like this. And ultimately, that's what I did. Now, that's the base layer or the foundation of what it is I do now. I had to do a lot. I didn't know at the time that my hitchhiking from New York to Alaska with no money or no food was going to be such a powerful experience for me, my readers, my family, my students, at all. I was in it. I didn't know it. And I didn't know that how powerful those were, because ultimately my life, I've been very good at asking good questions at the right time in a way that is foundational to someone else's questioning or change in their life. So when I'm in front of many of my clients, you're asking them to ultimately leave the known world and go into the unknown. And at the time when I was doing like all the things I just mentioned, I didn't really know of Joseph Campbell's work and the hero's journey. It would have been instrumental at the time if I did know that, because then I would say, okay, I'm now leaving the known and I'm going to have some consternation. I'm going into the unknown, and I'm going to find somebody who's going to support me. And then I'm going to learn something. Then I'm going to apply that learning, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that would have been an awesome life lesson for my students in 10th grade. So now, how did I become a coach? Well, I was teaching leadership and communication courses to a client, and one of the key client holders, if you will, came up to me and said, you should do this out on the workplace. And at the time I was working in oil and gas. And he, in the hero's journey, supported me in getting my business started, my S Corp and all my EIN number, et cetera.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning where I knew that all this matters. Everything I've done in the past matters up until this point. And as I coach somebody, and the honor and the privilege to coach somebody in a time when they're knowing or they're answering the call, either they're answering the call, they're refusing the call, or they're failing to recognize they're being called to leave the known and go into the unknown, I can support them because I've done it many, many a times. And some would say to an extreme sense, right? And in the safety, not necessarily in the safety of a building per se. However, I believe that leaders are formed in the wild. The wild can be anytime you leave the known and go into the unknown. And so I support people in that regard. And I've taken my craft very, very seriously, and learned a lot of different models that support people when they need it. And then that supported me in my understanding of the craft of a quote unquote coaching conversation, right? You got the contracting and you measure, and then you have the action items, et cetera, et cetera. But that supported me in being a better person, better husband, better father, better friend, and then ultimately a better coach. And having people like you in my life, or Chad, et cetera, or the mastermind groups that I've been honored to be a part of, or the mentors in my life, have allowed me to step into the unknown and craft a life with my lovely wife for my our two boys, to what better fits us at this time.
Yeah. And so you brought up coaching a bit there, and there's a bit of mystery around what coaching is, how it works, why it works, but I know that it does. And it is two people sitting with each other, maybe over Zoom like this, or maybe telephone, or maybe live and in person. But it's often two people, and you, Mike Green, as the coach, are really giving to that person your full undivided time and attention, energy, everything that you've done before, who you are, the journey you've been on, the depths that you have plumbed in your own self. There you are sitting with those people. And as you progressively, so you said your business model is very much like the book, where there's this fictitious client, Ian, who is a combination of everybody that you've worked with. So you said that you worked with Ian in an office setting or over Zoom, or like kind of traditional, let's create together, let's have conversations. But then it is all kind of brought to a crescendo by them coming to Alaska and stepping really into the unknown, and doing that with you and being out there. And it takes it to spend that time with you, takes it to a whole nother level. So my model, what I do for coaching work is a little bit different than yours. But your system and what you've built, yeah, all the way back to forming an LLC, and those
Mhm.
things can be confusing and daunting at times. But you've taken it to this place where there's a bit of a system to it for you, like really give everything you got, spend time with people, and then they come to Alaska and some things are probably in common, but every time somebody steps out into the bush, it's going to
Mhm.
be a completely brand new and unique experience for them on the
Right.
inside, right?
And there's usually a metaphor that they can utilize by the end of the day around the campfire. They've had some type of stress, whether it be weather stress, food stress, uh, the fact that they think there's a bear behind every bush kind of stress, self-induced stress, whatever have you. And part of the adventure coaching is they've always wanted to go out to Alaska and sea kayak near a glacier or through glacier icebergs or whatever have you, or calved ice, now called icebergs. And they're doing it, and they can't believe that they're doing it, and they're so elated. And that elation, when you have it's not like coaching 24/7. I'll ask a question at the beginning of the day, and then they'll sit with it as I'm out away from them, as they're paddling by themselves, thinking about that question. The elation that they have with that aha or moment or that epiphany now is Super Mario Brothers type thing. They're just expanded on it. And then they go away, and I say, okay, I'm going to make lunch. Go over there and journal as you listen to the glacier calving, right? And watching it, see it hit the water and see it make the waves, and then see the waves come across and ultimately lip at your feet, lick your feet as they go, as you're journaling. And meanwhile, I'm over in the distance cooking up lunch. People come back and they are changed. They are moved. And they normally, and I'm not saying putting this up for everyone, they are ultimately speechless. And being in that coach position, right? That's what I call it, where I'm in there for them. I'm holding that space. I'm holding that container, whatever words you want to use. When they're ready to talk about it, they do. Sometimes they just shake their heads and they just keep writing. And I'll go over nice and easy. I'll give them tea first or Tang, whatever they tell me they want. I'll let it sit, and then I'll bring her food and I'll stay away. And then I'll say something like, "It's time to go." That's about it. And then they're with it, man. And it's a very, very, very powerful experience. That's just one of many examples. I had a woman come to me this summer, and she wanted to be able to leave a current state of her career well, so that she could arrive well into the next one. And it's just she and I, and very fit. And she wanted just to be out in it and experience it as it happens. So we picked our peaks for the day and said, okay, we'll hit these 4 peaks. And that's what we did. And you think the coaching is not happening, but it is, when you ask a certain question, and then I hike ahead of you for a while, and then you're thinking it through and you're noticing different things about it. It's a very powerful place to be, because you are not near the distractions. The only distractions are you, not your phone, not the email, not your, do I have to pay the bill this week? Is my car, what's going on with my Toyota truck front end? My dog's LCL, my dog's knee is all traumatic, and that's not out there.
Wow.
That's the scariest part for people. They don't know it when they sign up, and I probably shouldn't say that out loud. But what's the scariest part for people out there is being by themselves. Forget the bears and forget the weather. It's being by yourself.
With you close by.
Of course, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that as you described all that, and I've had some experiences in my life that are at least on similar on that in that vein. You were making my head was hurting, in the most wonderful way, as you were describing the person who might be by the glacier that is large chunks of ice calving off into the water, sitting there with a journal, just them and being grounded and being there. I can imagine why that that when I say my head hurts, I mean like growth. Like I believe we hear neuroplasticity is spoken of, like the new pathways can be created, new possibilities can be felt. I can imagine that happens for the people that come there with the goal and intention of transformation and being ready for whatever's next. That's really
right.
cool.
And that's why I chose, to your point, that's why I chose Ian, who's a real person. Most of the conversations are with him, but there's other ones with other folks. He's a Brit, big, strong guy kind of thing, not used to being vulnerable by any means. And his humor in the book is ultimately like, when he comes away from that glacier journal experience, he says in very British dry humor, "Fuck me, you gotta tell me when that's gonna happen," and he's all quiet and then I'm just stirring the the Heather's Choice meal. Yeah, I know. But what's important is to understand the timing too. When they're all in, and then all of a sudden they got 2 more days or 1 more night, and then they got to start thinking about transitioning back to their past life and then you have to coach them through what's it going to look like when you arrive and how you're going to hold yourself accountable. Re-entry, literally.
Sure. Mike, I really appreciate you came and shared some time with the business builders, with my group of people who are doing life and business together. And it was really impactful for a few of the people afterwards mentioned me how impactful it was to spend that time with you. And they had read the book first, so they read the book and then they came to that time with you, and this piece about it all adds up was important to them as they were moving ahead. And somebody's going to listen to this podcast who wasn't on that call, and they're on a journey. I'm working with people that are building businesses that make the lives of people in their community or their clients or their employees better. They're creating in service to others, or to find freedom for their family. So our listeners are building these businesses, and they may have a question about how does it all add up, or why am I in the position I am as I'm building? Am I good enough and stuff?
Right.
Can you tell us more about talk a little bit about that? It all adds up. So not only for Mike Green, who's lived and worked on 7 continents, I think you're also saying Wayne's past and experiences and the business builders' past and experience all adds up too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for asking that question, because I was going to mention that. As you were saying, people listen to his podcasts, and I used to be the guy who was listening to podcasts or listening to Steve Chandler's books on audio, thinking I could never be that guy. I can never be that guy because I haven't had this, or I didn't do that, or I didn't have that life path that person had, or I didn't have those opportunities that person had. And I was always that person listening, thinking, that's really great. I'm really grateful. I'm entertained, but I know I can't be that guy. Well, of course you can't be that guy or that gal, because you aren't that gal or that guy. Once you get out of your own way, that's number one. Number two is understand that your life adds up to some type of value. For those who love you, for those who you love, and those who you want to provide value to. You just need to figure out what stories or what truths in your life, or what are your truths in life, and then base your decisions off of those, because you're now congruent, in my opinion. You decide what those truths are, and you make your choices based off those truths. And my truth, for example, was, as Wayne was talking about, or we talked about for the hitchhiking across New York to Alaska, was courage. You had to have the courage to follow through with what I just said. I didn't even say it. It was my muse that said it. And I'm thinking to my muse, what the hell's going on? And my other self was up in the corner looking down, going, what the hell did you just say? So I had the courage to follow through with that, the courage to stick my thumb out every day in the middle of nowhere or right outside of Chicago, crazy, or in the middle of the Yukon after finally leaving a guy that really irritated me after 3 days, So you have to decide what those truths are. And what I'm asking you and your listeners to, I'm respectfully asking, think of those stories in your life where are your truth. I know that I hitchhiked from New York to Alaska based off of courage. The courage to accept the kindness of others in all its forms, the courage to follow through with what I say I'm going to do. And that is a truth for me. And when I am faced with a opportunity to either answer the call, to ignore the call, because you have to acknowledge it to ignore it, or I feel like I'm being called, I have to have the courage to say, okay, what is this calling me to do? To step from the known into the unknown. And when I make those decisions based off those courage, because all our lives, everything we do adds up. Now you just need to mine those truths, make your decisions based off those truths. And when you do, you're more congruent. Most likely you're going to have a better experience for yourself and those around you. And if things don't go as well, at least you came from a place of congruence. And that is what I mean by everything adds up. You just have to mine those truths, those nuggets. There could be 5. I have 7 because of the 7 continents. My family, we have 5 that we focus on when we base all our group decisions off of, whether it be just getting a new puppy just recently, or where we're going to go on vacation to get out of the dark or the cold, right? So it's based off of those truths. And when I'm hitchhiking through Scotland, I remember on a Sunday, it was pissing down rain. And I was looking across the small little road. Nobody's picking me up. And I'm looking at these bunch of sheep and they're all going, bah, bah. And I'm thinking, I'm looking at who's the idiot here, me or those sheep? Because I'm out in the middle of nowhere, pissing down rain. And they're looking at me like, what the hell are you doing, you idiot? But that moment mattered to me. I didn't know it at the time that, that's the discomfort that comes with getting picked up by a beautiful family that takes you to their home, because they say it wouldn't be Christian to let you out there in the rain, and they give you tea to drink, but also tea that they call lunch, basically food. It all adds up. And that's kind of a long way of answering your question. But I hope that your listeners think about that for a moment. What are the stories in my life that really make a difference?
Well, our listeners are heroes. They are on a hero's journey.
True.
They all have stepped into the unknown. And so taking strength from your book and looking for the things in their life that adds up is going to be a worthwhile exercise for them. And I hope that people do it. The kind of lightning round questions here.
Lightning round.
Yeah. Where in the book you write about living and working on 7 continents and the truths that come from it. So where and what did you do in, and I'll just go through them, Antarctica?
I was a lead cargo handler, and I learned the truth of emotional intelligence, the traps that we set regarding our emotional intelligence at the time when we make decisions. And then when the realization or those decisions come to roost, right? It can be that's a trap. It can be.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story of humility. I enjoyed that one. Australia and New Zealand?
Optimism. And even in the face of death and total despair in the earthquake, you can find optimism.
And Asia, is that when you were with the eagle hunters?
Yeah, the Kazakh golden eagle hunters of Western Mongolia, the Atalay Mountains, the powerful, the strength and intention and the declaration of that intention is incredible. And they model that better than I've ever seen anywhere else.
And Africa?
Legacy. Abin Batuta wrote the book, regarding his travels. At the time, Ibn Battuta was in the 1400s, traveled all over the world at the time, and wrote a book that later on in my 15th year of my life, I read, and I knew right there that I could travel with no money. I mean, I didn't have to have money to travel. Coming from a small town, I too could travel the world. That
And
was
you've been a coach in Africa and coach people who are working
yes.
in oil fields, and a security contractor in Iraq. Am I remembering that right?
Correct. Yeah. And yeah, so several different regions of Africa, both on the water off the coast, or also in it. And also I did speaking engagements in a beautiful country of South Africa.
And Europe was logging in Scotland?
Yeah, logging in Scotland, yes. And that was integrity, because that was the most difficult job I've ever done, emotionally as well. Probably the most difficult job physically was lobstering in the Gulf of Maine. However, overall, the most difficult was logging in Scotland in the wintertime. I could have easily walked away and no one would ever see me ever again, but I gave my word that I would follow through and see it till spring. And I did. And that taught me the very valuable truth that integrity matters.
And South America?
A vision. I guided 9 university students for an outward bound course through the Trek de Condor to the top of Cotopaxi, which is the highest active volcano on the planet. It's 19,347 feet. And we basically did it self-sufficiently.
Yeah, that was a great, they're all great stories. I really, and
mud. Woof.
And then North America, in North America is the story of the hitchhiking,
Courage, yep.
Because you've done a bunch of other things. And
courage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. And so I just want to run through those stories, because when you and I met, one of the things that fascinated me was like, oh my goodness, this guy is just, he does not have a bone in his body that says, oh, I can't do that. Like you've gone these, and you're creative and fun, and I love working and love working in different environments, and you've done all those things. So it's great to be around you and your energy. And when I read your book, I felt like I was with you on those trips, and and really the truths that you identified resonated with me. So I encourage all the business, for sure. I encourage everybody to get a copy of your book, and like I said, a journal, and sit and think about, what are your stories and how does it all add up? So if somebody wants to join you for a year of high performance coaching capped by a trip, and I know you do things outside of Alaska, a lot, you live there, so it's kind of home base, and you are able to create experiences elsewhere, but a lot of them are in Alaska. So what would somebody do to get in touch with you and start the process to decide if you're the guy, the coach, to create this whole amazing year in transformation for them?
First, I would just go to my website, MikeGreenLeadership.com, and just find the contact page and just fill out the form about why you would want, kind of like the beginning of a discovery call. Just MikeGreenLeadership.com. And you want to think about journal real quick. You said journal. My book launched on March 17th of last year, and I saw on my calendar this year, just journal about your book being out there. And I was just thinking about it yesterday as I was driving back from Fairbanks, and I can stand to all those stories that they happened, because when people read them that know me, they go, yeah, you could have talked forever about all of those, more and more of them. And I think what's important is regarding those stories is that we accept them as they happened, all the warts and all. And because those are the lessons, there's lessons in them as well. And I stand behind that book And that book allowed me to be able to create the life I have with my lovely wife and my boys. So when you come to Alaska, you'll stay with us. We'll go out to the bush. If you don't want to do Alaska, you want to do Nicaragua, like maybe tobacco fields for cigar rolling, or you want to do castles in Scotland or Petra and Jordan or something like that. The good news is I have all the logistics figured out, and that's a huge portion of people's consternation is like, well, how do I get there and how much time is it going to take? I got all that taken care of.
Nice. MikeGreenLeadership.com. And so business builders, if you read the book Wandermust, and if it calls to you, and if you would like to explore working with Mike more closely, go to Mike Green Leadership and get started. Mike, I really appreciate you showing up and sharing more of your stories with our listeners today. And I'm excited about what you're continuing to create in Alaska. So thanks.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor to be part of your journey and the journey of others within your orb of influence. You're a fine human being, sir.
Thanks. I appreciate that. The people I surround myself with make me better, and you're one of those. So, man, go get them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Business Builder Way podcast. If this episode spoke to you, click that subscribe button and share it with a friend. That's how this message gets out into the world. If it is helpful for us to have a short conversation, I'd love to do that. Send me an email at wayne@businessbuildercamp.com.